Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Tarantino, the host of Exploring Everything Spiritual and the author of the book Dying to See Revelations about God, Jesus, Our Pathways, and the Nature of the Soul. I'd like to welcome you today to my program where we will dive deep into life's biggest questions and explore the mysteries of existence, consciousness, and the beyond. If you're new here, I'm so glad you found us. And this space is where open minds and curious hearts come together to expand, question, and grow. For those of you returning, thank you for being part of this amazing community. Your interest, your insights, and energy are what keep these conversations alive. So, whether you've been with us from the start or if you're just beginning your journey here, get ready to explore new perspective, challenge old beliefs, and maybe even discover something that changes your life. Now, let's dive in. Today on Exploring Everything Spiritual, we are honored to have a truly remarkable guest, someone whose story will give us some insight into the journey of the soul. Philip Hasheider is a Wisconsin farmer, husband, writer, and local historian. But beyond those roles, he is also someone who has experienced something most of us can only wonder about, a near-death experience that profoundly changed his perspective of life and the afterlife. During what should have been an ordinary day, Philip's heart stopped for 6 minutes, and the afterlife journey into other dimensions reveals insights about the nature of existence and the purpose of our lives and the eternal spark within us all. The full scope of his journey can be found in his remarkable book, 6 Minutes in Eternity. Welcome, Philip. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you, Janet. It's a real pleasure for me to speak with you and with your audience and explain what happened.
Wonderful. Can you take us back to the morning before the experience or the day of the experience and tell us how you were feeling and did anything seem unusual that day?
Well, the 2 days are kind of really interconnected more than just one day after another. Um, on our farm, we pasture graze beef cattle. And I went out every morning to check on them to make sure there were no problems. There was no animal that needed attention and that sort of thing. So I'd sometimes it would be a quick trip out, and other times it'd be more prolonged as I just walked around the field. And prior to that morning, when I collapsed, even the morning before, there was nothing unusual. I walked out there. I could get amongst the cattle because the breed we had is fairly docile. So I would walk amongst them, pet them, scratch them, talk to them, and they wouldn't hardly pay me any attention. Uh, but that morning, it was a Monday morning, and when I walked out there, uh, they were all lying. There were 27 head out there, and they were all lying down about the middle of the pasture, which was roughly a 50-acre parcel. And I never got closer than 250 feet or so when one of them jumped up and looked at me, perked her ears forward, uh, on alert, and momentarily looked and then took off racing across the field. She went about 600 feet and stopped, turned around and looked at me. And of course, that got the attention of all the other animals, and they got up and looked at me. And then they took off across the field and stopped where that other one was and turned around, and they all looked at me. In thinking about it later, I mean, this was several weeks and months later. Uh, if I had paid attention to them that morning, I might have suspected something was about to happen, but I didn't. And so when I saw them, I saw that there was no animal that needed my attention. And so I turned around and I walked back to our farmyard. And coincidentally, that morning, I had arranged for our car's tires to get replaced in our local village, which is 12 miles away. So, since I had that appointment, and it didn't take me as long in the morning out in the pasture, I went in. I changed clothes and I drove into town. And uh, I usually kept my duffel bag with me because I had, for the previous 5 months, in answer to your question, I had been going to our local hospital's rehab slash fitness room to exercise and work out on the recommendation of my doctor because my blood pressure had slowly begun to rise, which I had never had a problem with. So that should have been an indication that there was something going on. But after 5 months, my blood pressure came back down, and so it didn't seem like any problem. So that morning was pretty typical, excluding the cattle, pretty typical about what I would have been doing. However, once I got to our town, I realized I have time now to go for my exercise, and I can still have time to get the tires changed, which seems pretty minute at this point. But it was the way things progressed that morning. So instead of turning right to go get the tires changed, I made a decision and turned left and went to our hospital's rehab fitness room. Well, I parked the car, went downstairs, changed, came back up, said hi to the staff people that were in the room, stretched, uh, sat down and did what I thought were a modest 20 arm curls. And I stood up, and the strangest thing happened. Both of my forearms started tingling like they had fallen asleep. And I remember the last thing I did remember was looking down at both of my forearms and wondering what was going on. So one moment I'm standing next to this arm curl bench, and a moment later, I found myself in a completely different dimension. Uh, I didn't know why I was there because it certainly wasn't the fitness room, but I didn't feel anything other than being welcomed. I didn't feel anything other than this overwhelming sense of love that came to me. It was a sense of, wow, I know everything there is to know. And in that moment of realization, I understood that I was floating, but it wasn't on water waves. It was what I can explain as energetic waves that were coming towards me. I was floating on these waves, and they were coming towards me because I could see them, but yet they were also passing through me, which I thought was really interesting because I had never experienced anything like that before, at least not here. So when I looked up, I saw what, now I'm going to use words that are common in our vocabulary, but I would ask people to listen to the vibration of the words because what I saw was more than just simple words can possibly explain here. When I looked up, I saw what I will describe as a gigantic golden, yellow, glowing, pulsing sphere that filled up the whole dimension of what was in front of me. And this is where the sense of love, the sense of all knowledge, the sense of welcoming was coming from. And looking back on it, I didn't realize at that moment that I had died or was lying on the hospital fitness float. That realization or that correlation came much later. But when I was looking at this golden sphere, I turned to there. I saw what I'll describe as little sparkles shooting out from it all over the surface of it, billions upon billions. I mean, billions doesn't even cover the number in our language, but they were shooting out all over the surface of this and heading into different directions. And I decided to look to see where they were going because I understood that this was some form of energetic release, propulsion, something of that sort. And when I looked over to my right, as we understand left, right, forward, and backward, when I looked to my right, what I saw is what I can best explain as an infinite multitude of dimensions and universes. And it was easily recognizable. To describe it, I'm going to ask you to consider everything in our universe, the one we're presently in, all of the dimensions of it, the depth, the planets, the stars, everything you can think of, and compress that down into what I'll say, let's say a single sheet of paper. And then you suspend that over here in this eternal dimension. And then next to that, you put another one. And next to that, another one. And you keep doing this as far into infinity that you can imagine. And that's just one direction, if you will, of what it was. You could go the other direction. You could go front, back, up, sideways, crossways. There were all of these universes and dimensions suspended out in this eternal space. The interesting thing that I realized at that point was that each one of those dimensions, universes, had an energetic filament that was connected to it and reached back and attached itself to a spider web-like matrix that surrounded this golden orb that pulsed with the brilliance of a 10 million suns, but yet it was so close I could touch it and not get burned, like it wanted me to merge with it. So there were all of these dimensions and universes suspended here. And I finally realized that what those little jets that were coming out, those little sparks, were going into these dimensions. And I realized that was me at one point before I came into this universe. That was you and everyone listening to this. That's where the origin of us came. And I realized that what I was looking at was the source of all creation, the divine creator, the God essence, if you want to put a name to it. It's more than that, but it's not a personage. It's an energetic, infinite knowledge that was pulsing out. And seeing those sparks, I understood that because that's where I came from, and that's where you came from, or everyone here on this plane of existence, we all carry the DNA of that creator energy. And so we bring it here when we come here. So we are all part of what I had seen. Well, I decided to turn around and take a look what was behind me because all of these energetic waves were going through me and passing off in the back, as we understand front and back. So I turned around, and what I saw I can best describe as infinity. And that's because the emulsion of eternity acted like a magnifying glass, so that the farther I looked, the clearer everything became. And I understood that I was looking at this whole scene through a different lens, a different set of eyes, if you will, than the low wattage of my eyes here could never experience and never see. Now, all of, and this came to me much later, all of this time that I was there in that eternal dimension, there were a dozen people back at the fitness center trying to revive me, trying to get my heart restarted with electric shocks, chest compressions. And this I got from interviewing the people who worked on me. Had I known it at that time, which I didn't, but had I known that they were working furiously to get me back, I would have said, hey, don't bother. This is so good. I would prefer to stay here than go back. And I couldn't call them to tell them that. So it was such a warm experience that has now become a part of me. And somehow I was able to bring that experience in a memory as I transitioned back from that eternal dimension to this one. So they finally did restart my heart. And all of a sudden, I was gone from that dimension. I was now back in my body. I assumed, I didn't realize it yet. And it wouldn't be another 8 hours until I fully understood that I was here and not in that other dimension. So in less than a split second, I mean, not even that, I was there, and now I'm back here. And it was the longest trip I had ever taken in 6 minutes. But it left me with an experience that took me a long time to understand, and even a longer time to try to explain to someone. And as it would turn out, it would be another 7 months before I would be given the answer as to why I returned here. And it was a lot of what I refer to as interdimensional confusion. And now I don't even have to sit down and think about it, because what I experienced in that dimension, I see in the background of everything I look at. I mean, it's always present. It's always there. And I'm thankful for it because it's very comforting. I like to say that on that early October morning, I became an expert in dying. But I understand that I've now become an expert in hope because of what happened to me, allowing me to experience that, being able to retain that information and bring it back here and formulate it within the cells of my brain and understand what it all means. Oh, at least to me. And that's one of the things I've come to reconcile myself to is that my experience was just mine. As much as I try to explain it to people, it wasn't their experience. The same way with my wife, Mary. I could explain it to her, but she could not understand the experience in the same way I did. However, if you flip that, I couldn't understand the experience she went through, seeing me lying there in the hospital, not knowing if I'd be going home with her eventually or if I'd just be boxed up and sent out. So it's been quite a journey to try to understand everything. I'm not sure that I have, to be very honest, I'm not sure that I've really realized everything I experienced there. I like to use a comparison. It's kind of a rough comparison, but say our brains have 6 gigabytes of memory, and all of a sudden that brain is exposed to 100,000 uh, terabytes. So, what would happen if you tried to pack all that back into the brain here? It probably would fry it or something, you know. So, I do think and I do believe that I was only given that amount of information that I could safely bring back here to try to digest and understand and work with. And that I'm confident in the future I will be given more. And if I'm not, okay, that's fine, because I know what my experience was. And again, it's my experience, and this is going to sound crass, but I really don't care if anyone else believes it or not, because I'm the only one that has to be satisfied with it. I would hope that people would study it and listen to it and evaluate it and think that that's what happened, because I have no reason to deceive anyone. I have no reason to deceive myself. Um, so that's pretty much what happened that morning. It seems like a long journey, but it only happened within 6 minutes. But it's taken me several years to really work out exactly what it was all about.
Well, you did awesome because it takes normally, 10 to 15 years for people to understand the depth of their experience. So I have no doubt that you're going to come to an understanding on even more in the future. But this was fantastic. And it's in my list of interviews, I have other people that have had similar experiences like yours, like the dimensions. Believe he was in my scope of videos, or I saw him somewhere. But anyway, there's another near-death experiencer that saw the layers of dimensions. Were you in any of those other dimensions? Was this a multiverse? Did you understand that, or were these just different dimensions with different life forms or something?
In answer to your question, no, I only remember at this point being on this raft, if you will, floating on these energetic waves. It was like I was on a short trip. Well, short in relation to eternal time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it felt like I was there centuries, if you
Mm-hmm.
want to equate it with something. But yet, the timeline back that I was able to get from my EMT reports and from the staff in the room was that it was roughly a little over 6 minutes before they got me back. Now, again, I didn't really comprehend anything around me for another 8 hours. And I remember the moment that happened, I was apparently lying in the emergency room. They had taken me by ambulance to Madison, which is 30 miles away from here. And looking at my feet, that was the first thing that came back. I was looking at my feet, and my wife was standing there rubbing them. And I had no idea what she was doing there because she wasn't in the fitness room. And then I looked and I saw our son and daughter and our daughter's fiance, and they weren't there in the room either, except now here they are. And it took a long time to really what I phase in or be cognizant of what was going on. But I do remember looking at the clock on the wall, and it said 8 o'clock. And I said to somebody standing, next to me with a clipboard, I said, that can't be the right time. And this person said, well, why not? And I said, it was 11 o'clock. Time doesn't go backwards, at least not here. And there was this cough from everybody around me. And he said, well, it's 8 o'clock at night. And so I just kept quiet because nothing made any sense
Yes.
at the point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How did your wife Mary take this experience?
Oh, dear. Uh, Initially, I have no recognition of what she went through. It took a year before we could actually really talk about it. It was pretty raw because she had a full-time job, and when she got the call, she didn't even know I had gone into our town. And she thought I was just staying home that day. And so she had to drop everything she was doing, uh, race to the hospital. Not and then when she saw me, she wasn't even sure I was going to make it through the night. So it's this initial shock, and it's gotten a little better over the years, but it's still pretty raw for her because of all of the things she saw me as before, and then now after I was pretty active before, and now I was just kind of this lump lying lying on the gurney and not knowing what was going to happen. Well, and then she had to deal with all the insurance issues before they'd take me out of the emergency room. I found all this out later, but I had no concept that she was going through anything because I thought, man, I had just been in this great place, and
Yes.
why isn't anybody happy? I am. I'm really happy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's taken a long time, and I will mention that we have since found. Prior to my collapse, I had no idea about a near-death experience. I never read it about them. It wasn't on my radar. Uh, I now know that there are many other people who have had them, and that could be a point we come back to because of the uniqueness that each person experiences. But with the understanding that she had and I have now, we found out that for particularly married couples, perhaps long-term partners, that for married couples anyway, the divorce rate is 60 to 80%.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to one person having this fantastic experience, me, and then the other person experiencing all of the uncertainty, all of the crap that goes with it, if you will, and not understanding each other and maybe not wanting to put up with it. So we're fortunate, but she's worked through it pretty much, and right now we're in a pretty good place
Good.
with each other.
Wonderful. Did you tell her what you experienced and did she accept that pretty well?
Oh yes, yes,
Okay.
and mainly because she knows that I'm not going to tell her a lie.
Yeah.
And so my experience is something she understands
Mm-hmm.
from the standpoint of another person listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually she's the reason I understood why I came back. Well, I can explain that. It was about 7 months later after I had been home. The medications that they gave me to lower my blood pressure did too good of a job because it lowered it so well I had a second collapse and I ended up in the hospital again. And it was about this time that oh man, I was so sluggish, I could hardly function. Now we have a working farm, so I wasn't allowed to do any of the work with any of the machinery. She wouldn't let me to go outside by myself unless she was following me or beside me. Uh, Again, she had a full time job, so she was not only babysitting me, she was trying to understand if my cognizance was going to come back, or was she going to be stuck with this uh, vegetable for the rest of her life? So I think there were a lot of stress points for her to go through. But one night, it was the next morning. I basically came down the stairs from our upstairs bedroom, plopped myself in the kitchen chair at one end, and she was sitting at the other end, which I thought, well, she's holding a notepad. I was wondering what I did wrong now. And she waited a minute. And then she said, do you want to hear what you said last night? I said, I didn't say anything. I don't remember anything from last night. She said, oh, yeah, you said something. And I had written it down because I thought it might be important. I said, okay, what did I say? As I was kind of bracing myself for this. And she said, well, you sat up in bed and you started mumbling, and I couldn't understand what you were talking about. And then you stopped, and all of a sudden you started shaking your head from side to side, saying, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And she asked me, well, what don't you believe? And she said, I told her the reason I came back. And she said, well, what was that reason? And she said, I told her the reason I came back was, this is what I was told, that I was to be a conduit of hope for those who don't have any and don't think there is any. And she went quiet. And I said, well, what else? She said, nothing. You laid back down and went back to sleep. So once she said that, I fully understood the reasons that my collapse had happened in our local hospital's rehab room, rather than 1 hour earlier out in our farm's pasture with our beef cattle. Because if it had happened out there, no one would have found me for 8 hours, 6, 8 hours. And then they wouldn't know where to look because the grass was fairly well grown. So I understood why it happened in the rehab room versus out in the pasture. And that was like a light bulb going on for me, because I fully understood why I went through all of that and why I returned here. Now, I would not suggest to anyone to go have a near-death experience, because you might not come back, and that's not a bad thing. But it's not something I've been given a pass by. By that I mean, I still have to deal with this universe, the laws, the physics, the roadways, I have to work, pay my bills like everybody else. I mean, I wasn't given a pass. I just have to rearrange my life in how I pursue all those things.
Yeah, and you have a mandate. You have
Well,
a mandate to spread hope and help
and
people reflect on what truly matters.
and that's what I've been trying to do. I mean, I don't want it to sound as an egotistical thing, because it's not. It's just a full understanding of why I'm here. Now, I'm certainly not an evangelist by any means, but I wrote my book so that I could understand it first. I needed time to process the things that I had experienced and try to find words to explain it, because in that dimension, there is no vocabulary. All knowledge is instantly transmitted, and it's not verbal. But yet here we have to try to come to some sort of approximate understanding of using the same words. And so it took me a long time to find those words that best described what I saw and experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty satisfied with what I've used. Certain things have happened since then that I might want to add if I were going to go back and rewrite it. But that's okay. The main message is in there, and I'm satisfied with that, I guess, is the way to put it.
Yeah. The other near-death experiencer that I interviewed that might interest you because he saw the web too that you're describing, and his that was Rob Gentile. So you might want to take a listen to see if that is similar to
Okay.
yours. So there's a lot of people out there that are having similar experiences, which which supports each other that of what's going on here.
Well,
So,
that's an interesting, if I may jump in, that's an interesting point because, as I mentioned much earlier, that each one of us here is a unique individual.
mhm,
So when we have that experience, or those that do, why would it be the same? Uh, we all experience things here differently, but we have a commonality of what we experience.
mhm,
Our interpretation of it might be different. And I see that just as an extension of when we leave here,
mhm,
which is it's going to happen for everyone
mhm.
because none of us are left behind, basically, is what I'm trying to
Exactly.
say is none of us are destroyed forever.
Mhm.
We just continue on. And maybe I'll find one of those other universes.
Right.
I I,
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
I've likened it to an energetic superhighway. In 1951, I took the off ramp and I came down into this dimension, which is a lower dimension, energetic wise. And I was born of my parents. I was raised by them. I now have spent a little over 73 years here. But sooner or later, I now understand, and I did before, our body is going to use up its fuel. And so when that happens, I will, that inner part of me, that little bit of DNA that I saw shooting out from this golden God essence, that's me.
Mhm.
That's, and when that, I brought that with me. And when I leave, that will continue. Not this body. I mean, this is just a dense body. Not that I want to go tomorrow, but if I do,
Yeah.
it's fine too. But that will go on and continue to have experiences in, well, how long can you count forever or infinity? That long. And we will learn as we progress through each one of these iterations of ourself in whatever form that becomes. One of the things that I finally realized, and this was about a year and a half later while I was working through writing my thoughts out, our bodies are more than the sum of its parts.
Mhm.
By that I mean, when I was standing next to the arm curl bench, I had all of the body parts that I had when I collapsed onto the floor a moment later, except for one thing. That inner essence of me, the God essence, the soul, the spirit, whatever you want to call it, took off and went back to its home. And then when they restarted my heart, it had to come back here for me to finish whatever I need to finish. So there's, there's a lot to just the simple act of falling over next to somebody's feet on the floor.
So do you think that that spark, which lives inside of each one of us, is the energy that allows this body to move forward in life? And then that's why once it leaves, that's why the body fails.
I think, well, for me, this is my opinion. I think when our body finally fails, then it leaves. It knows that this is the
Right.
end.
Yeah, that's what I meant,
Now,
I guess you could say.
I do believe that other entities, other spirits, some may call them angels, guardian angels, and that's fine. Whatever word resonates with a person thinking about it, I think they're here, but they just probably can't show themselves because they don't have a dense physical body like we do. They're a spirit. They're a energetic uh, essence. So why would they show themselves in exactly the same way as we are? Now, I'm not saying that can't happen because I think they can uh, embody or come with somebody else, uh, and that's not a topic I want to get into because I'm not an expert about it.
Mhm.
But I do think that we can sense them. If someone has said to themselves, "Well, I thought this person was standing next to me," probably they were in their essence that we couldn't see, but you could feel that energy.
Mhm.
And so, coming into this dimension, they would need a body to be able to experience what we do, the tactile things, the visual things, the emotional things, the whatever it is we can identify here as touching, understanding, eating. So, yeah, I think that there are many forms of it, and I don't dismiss anybody's understanding of it.
No, no. I mean, stories may differ, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of aspects that are same in a lot of different stories. They just explain them
Mhm.
slightly different.
Mhm.
Yeah, but everyone is meaningful to that person, and it changes their life. I'm sure your life was changed too. So,
Well, yes, it was.
yeah. Philip, your story is out of this world, incredible and thought-provoking. I'm deeply grateful that you agreed to share your story with us today. Before wrapping up, do you have any thoughts, last thoughts that you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Yes. Thank you.
Mhm.
I appreciate the opportunity. There are two things that I would like to say. That uh, we are here, what as I understand it now, we are here to recognize the divinity in every person we encounter, every person we don't encounter, every person we like, or every person we don't like. They are of the same DNA, the creator DNA, as you and I are. So it is up to us to accept them. Even though we may not like what they do, we still have to accept them. And there's nothing wrong with not condoning what they do, not being judgmental, but not condoning. And the second thing is that hope. Hope is the pathway on which each of us can journey through this dimension. And that's what I would like to leave for everybody, because this is not the end. This is just a small portion of our continuation. And what could be better than that?
Exactly, exactly. Fabulous. Thank you for sharing that. And you have my deepest gratitude for your and my heartfelt thanks for being here today. And as we wrap up today's episode, I just want to announce going forward, we now have added subtitles in multiple languages to my videos. To easily access the other subtitles, simply click the gear symbol, then select subtitles to see the list of languages. Then, of course, make your selection. Also, I want to take a moment to thank my dear listeners for being here to listen to these incredible experiences. Your presence here means more than you may realize. In light of your significance, I invite you to take a moment to show appreciation to our guest. Please consider posting a thank you to Philip for sharing his incredible story, by sharing your favorite part of his experience, or by asking your question, or even sharing your own experiences in the comments below, because we want to know your recollections and your thoughts. Your feedback matters. It's not only honors his journey, but also deepens the conversation for all of us. This program, Investigating Everything Spiritual, isn't just a collection of stories, thoughts, or voices. It's a connection between souls. So until next time, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and remember your voice, your story, your presence matters. And most of all, love is the highest and best gift we can give each other. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share, and join us again next time. Goodbye, everybody.